Hello everyone, welcome to Lab Studies. In this video, we are going to solve one more SQL interview problem that was asked in Tesla and Google interviews. It is given passengers details like this is just like a Titanic dataset having different passengers information like passenger IDs, survived or not, P class details, name of the passengers, and you can see here all these details are given. Okay, and it is asking like written number of survivable and not survivable count of passengers for each class. So we need to count number of passengers who survived or not. For each class we have to count it. Okay, so let's see how we are going to solve this problem. So now if you observe, there are total 20 passengers are there, and if you observe this column like survived, so if you mention 0, that means that passenger is not survived. 1 represents this passenger survived. So wherever 1 is there, that means that passenger survived. Okay, so now if you observe P class, so there are different classes are there like 1 2 3 are there. These three classes are available and these passengers are allocated for different P classes. Okay, so now if you observe, so with the help of these three columns we can easily solve this problem, right? And we no need to consider any other column, right? So now we have to count passengers with help of passenger ID from passengers, right? So now if you observe, there are total of 20 passengers are there. Among 20 passengers, how many survived? We'll see by using survived count. Here survived wise, so you have to keep that in group by, right? So now if I execute this one, that's going to return. So total 20 passengers are there, and among them, so 10 are not survived and 10 are survived. Okay, so let's see in each class wise. So if you do like this, you have to keep that also in group by, right? Otherwise you'll be getting error, right? So you have to keep that P class also in group by. Okay, now if you execute this one, you can see here it is returning like survived or not for each class, right? But if you observe, this problem was asked in Google and Tesla interviews, so we should not return data like this because it won't says like exactly like information by looking at the data, right? So you have to convert this rows like 1 1 2 2 like this as columns. So how we can do that? I mean, you have to convert this entire into two records. So here survived 0 and 1. For that you have to mention for each class how many survived, how many not survived. Okay, how we can do that? We can easily solve this problem with help of conditional statements, right? So this is just like a pivoting and unpivoting concept, right? So now I'm just using survived. Okay, now what we have to do? We have to count off passenger only when they survived, right? So let's see here case when survived equal to 0, then I'm going to mention, or else you can also mention 1. Okay, then you have to return passenger ID, right? Otherwise what we have to do, we are using count here, so you have to use null. Okay, let's see if we use else 0, if I use else 0 and you have to end it, it's going to return different answer. Okay, I'll explain in detail. Okay, now I'm going to mention this as, okay, you have not mentioned any class, so you have to, what you have to do, you have to count the number of passengers for each class, right? So you have to mention here each class, not survived. Okay, for that I'm going to mention P class equal to 1, then we are just counting that. Okay, so as first class, I'm just using first class. Okay, so after that what we have to do, we have to count case when P class equal to 2, then we have to count it. Okay, else I'm going to return 0. I'm going to end this one as second class, because if you observe, we are finding number of passenger for each class, each survived wise. So when you use counting, and here also if you observe, we are just using survived and count of passengers, and we just used in group by, right? So now how it's returning? It's returning like survived wise number of passengers. Now what we are doing, we are counting, but this time we are counting for each class wise for survived or not. Okay, let's see here. For third class, I'm just using count of case when fleet class equal to 3, then passenger I'm going to return in the sense whatever you return, that's you are trying to count in, right? Passenger ID, else you're going to return 0. Okay, end as third class. Okay, from passengers, what we have to do, so here you are trying to counting them, right? So if you just remove the survived, it will work. I mean, it will be returning the values, but what you have to do? You have to find the survived wise, right? So now you have to count for survived wise. So you have to keep that in group by, right? Group by of survived. Okay. So now if you observe, this will result in different data like wrong results. You can see here. So actually there are total of 20 passengers are there. But if you observe, in each class it's returning 20. Why? Because of you're trying to counting of passenger. Even though if you use 0, that's going to count only. So that means in P class, either the P class is 1, that's going to count off, right? So each and every time that's going to count. How many are there? Those many for each and every time, for each and every else of 0, that's going to count. Not only a P class, it's going to consider each and every passenger, right? So if P class is not 1, that's going to return else of 0, right? Else in the sense, this is going to return, and that's where even though if you observe for each and every one it's returning total of 20, right? So you have to change this else null. So count of null is 0, but count of 0 is 1. Okay, that you have to be very careful here. You should return null, right? So when you are using sum, you can use 0, no problem. Here I'll explain that also. Here when you're counting, only when passenger class equal to, I mean P class equal to 1, then you are returning, right? And you are counting it. Otherwise, else if you are counting 0 also, that each and every time it's going to count only, right? Therefore total you are getting total of 20 passengers for each class. So otherwise you have to mention null. So null won't be counted, right? So now if I execute this one, you can see here it's returning different answer, and this is the exact answer. So each, like survived wise, each class if you observe, 2 survived, and here I mean not survived, 4 not survived, and not survived, right? So this is 0, right? In one survived 4, 3 and 3. So these are the survived details for each class. Even if you add all of them, you'll be getting 20. So there are 20 passengers are there, right? So this is one way of writing solution. So now if you observe, so why it is counting even if you 0? Because of that is value. So that is the reason it's going to count only. But if you use null, it won't count. Okay. So how we can make it in different way? You can also use sum of only when P class equal to 1, you are returning this one. So if you have returning this one, that's going to adding of all passenger ID. So what you have to do? You need to return the count only, right? So you have to return 1, else you have to return 0. Okay. This is another way. Okay, now each and every time I'm going to return 1 and then else 0, because of we are using sum right now. Now if you observe, for each class, if P class is 1, then that's going to return 1, else 0. Again you are using addition, right? So that is why you'll be getting normal values. I'm just using sum here also, but I'll explain with null also how it's going to return. So now if you observe the same result, but you are using sum of those passengers who, if in P class equal to 1, that's going to summing of all those, each and every time you are adding 1, right? So that is why you are getting same result. But if you observe null, how it's going to return, now you can see here. If I execute this one, if you observe how it's returning same values, right? Because of in aggregate function, null will be considered as 0, right? But if you are using count, it is also returning the same value, but you should consider 0, that's going to return different values. Okay, so no problem with sum, you can also use null. I hope you understood.